My name is Lauren Summers. I'm Senior Director of Lifelong Learning and Travel at the Yale Alumni Association. I'm your host for the webinar today. We're really going to be talking about our trip, Chile, Land of Contrast, which is taking place in 2023. We're going to tell you all about that trip. Along the way, you're going to learn a little bit about Chile. And I am joined by Dean Indy Burke, who is Dean of the Yale School of the Environment. Hi, Dean Burke, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thank you. It's great to be here, and I'm so looking forward to this.
All right, well, I'm going to share my screen. And if you all will be a little bit patient with me, look at that. It worked right the first time. Excellent. And I'm going to take you through a little bit about the trip and stop along the way to give Dean Burke an opportunity to talk to you as well about some of her thoughts about the trip. So this trip is called Chile, Land of Contrast, deserts, lakes, and glaciers. And I have been to Chile myself many times, and I have to say that I think it is one of the most remarkable places on the planet, simply for the fact that you can go from one end where you're in a desert and the other end where you're at a glacier, and you have every kind of landscape and lifestyle in between. And we're going to learn a little bit about that on today's presentation. The dates of the trip, for those of you who are interested in knowing more about the trip, we will share more at the end, but the dates are January 19th through February 3rd, 2023. And just give me a moment. I'm going to move through my screens, but I've got to move my Zoom menu. And that reminds me that if you have comments, please feel free to place your comments for each other in the chat. If you have questions that you want us to address, please put your questions in the Q&A box. So we're going to explore today the contrast of Chile. We're going to talk about the various regions from Santiago to Patagonia to the Atacama Desert. And as I get started, I want to showcase our illustrious hosts for this trip. You will be traveling with Dean Indy Burke and William, or better known as Bill Lauenroth, from the Yale School of the Environment. Am I saying his name correctly?
Yes, you are. It's a German name. A-U-E is Lau.
Well, I love his name because it's very close to my name, Lauren. So it's really easy for me to remember that. If you take the R out of Lauren, you have the first half of his last name. So he's not with us today, but we're welcoming him in spirit, and he will definitely be on the trip. And I thought I would just sort of pause here, Dean Burke, and just give people a chance to study the map while they listen to you say a little bit about where did this idea come from? Why were you so excited about doing a trip to Chile?
Sure, I'd love to. Bill Lauenroth, the other faculty member, and I've traveled to Chile and Patagonia and Argentina a number of times for research collaborations and actually leading student classes. We're both dry land ecologists, so we study the dry places of the world and how they're influenced by climate change and by land use, including those in South America. All these landscapes are characterized by very open landscapes and sharp contrasts. Chile has amazing natural diversity in all of its manifestations. And it spans almost 40 degrees of latitude, from one of the driest deserts in the world to some of the wettest forests along the west slope of the Andes. It actually has a 6,000 square mile ice field in Chilean Patagonia. And most of Chilean Patagonia is cold desert that is grazed by the native guanacos and sheep. And of interest to us is that Chile is particularly vulnerable to climate change, which is already happening. Average temperatures in Chile are expected to increase by 1.5 degrees or so in the next decade, and as much as 3 to 3.5 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. If you don't know, you may know that 2 degrees centigrade is thought to be the tipping point for the planet by global change scientists. So it's a particularly vulnerable area, and the southern regions are particularly vulnerable because if the temperature goes up, there's less available water. And I'll just say one more thing about Bill and I. We met and married while studying ecosystems like this, while we were professors at Colorado State University. We were there for 20 years and then moved to the University of Wyoming, then here in 2016. And during all this time, we have brought people with us to the dry places. We took our children and students to the dry places, to Patagonia for a sabbatical when they were 3 and 4. We've taken them to Patagonia again a few years later. We've taken them to Inner Mongolia in their early teens, and we've taken students to Patagonia 3 times, working with our colleagues and ex-graduate students who are actually now professors down there. And we just love our experiences with the people, the landscapes, the estancias, and of course the plants and soils and wildlife. So we're thrilled to be a part of this trip with Yale alumni.
Well, thank you so much, Dean Burke, and I'm thrilled that you thought of us and that you thought of traveling with alumni, because the students who've had an opportunity to travel with you certainly have been really, really fortunate. And it's our mission at the Alumni Academy to create the same kinds of opportunities for alumni to travel with faculty and learn and experience some of the important lessons that you are bringing to bear on your students and your scholarship at Yale. So this is, just a wonderful opportunity, and we're going to have a great chance to talk a little bit today. I do encourage everybody, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A box. We will get to your questions during our session. I want to start just by giving people a chance to orient yourselves to the country of Chile. One of the most brilliant things about Chile that I think us as Americans, we don't think of it this way, is that South America is such an expansive continent, just from north to south. And here you have this country that basically runs the entire length of the continent. And that's what makes Chile really unique, and bounded on the eastern side, mostly by the Andes Mountains. And as Dean Burke identified, it creates a very unusual, distinctive sort of weather pattern, creates a very unusual and distinctive environment in terms of climate, but it also does so in terms of culture. And we're going to touch a little bit on some of the cultural unique things about Chile that you may not realize if you haven't traveled there. In terms of our itinerary for this program, we start in Santiago, which is sort of at the center of the country, and that's of course your gateway to getting in and out of Chile. And we travel by plane. After the visit to Santiago, we travel by plane north to the Atacama Desert for several days, and then we go back south to the, you see it on the map as the Osorno volcano area, but this is the Chilean Lake District. And then there's an excursion to Chiloe Island, which I'm going to mention. Further south, we go to Torres de Baine National Park, which is sort of the gateway of Chilean Patagonia. And there's an extension for those who want to travel further afield to Easter Island. So that gives you just an overview. Remember this map because we're going to talk through each of these stops, but that gives you an overview of what to expect in the different aspects of the itinerary. So we start off in Santiago. Santiago, the first time I ever went to Santiago, I was so surprised by how beautiful the city was and how European feeling that it was, not knowing anything about Chile and sort of landing in Santiago and being exposed to this very cosmopolitan city that has a wide variety of different neighborhoods and cultures contained within it. The population of Santiago is about 5.6 million people. And our hub when we stay in the city is in the Bohemian Arts District, the La Staria neighborhood. You kind of see that up on the left-hand side picture there. And you have a chance while you're in Santiago to get a really good taste of the city. So on the right-hand side picture, you see this this park that runs right through the center of the city, the Parque Forest. And it reminds me a lot of, for those of you who've been to New York, it reminds me a lot of Central Park. It's sort of like a central hub where people go to enjoy a stroll in the afternoon where there's music performances. There are several museums in the park. So you're going to get a chance to visit the Parque Forestal and see some of the different neighborhoods, Bellavista, Providencia. Santiago has a number of universities in the city, lots of museums, an incredible cultural scene, art, music, great food and cuisine, and of course, a lot of history to learn about. So on the left-hand side here, you see the La Monera Palace, which is the presidential palace in downtown Santiago. And I know those of you who are familiar with the history of Santiago will understand that there's quite a complex political history to explore. I'm not going to go into that today, but it's definitely still a topic that is very present in the hearts and minds of Chilean people living especially living in the cities. So it's something that if you are interested in Chile, I would encourage you to read up on the political history and become educated on that before you embark on this trip. So moving on, you would have seen on the map there was a little dot to the west of Santiago, and that is a day excursion we're taking on this trip to a city called Valparaiso. And Valparaiso is a major shipping port center, so it's set on the Pacific Ocean, and it's a city that runs up a very steep mountainous area and brings with it a vibrant culture of street art. In addition to its sort of hub as a crossroads of shipping and transportation for goods coming in and out of Chile, it is also a cultural hub. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is known for its street art. You see some of that in the bottom right corner. And if you are not familiar with South American street art, it is a phenomenon in and of itself. It has a very strong connection to the political history of South America, and in particular in Chile, to the Chilean political history from the Pinochet era. And this city earned its status because of the museum quality street artwork that you will see as you tour the city streets. Dean Burke, have you been to Valparaiso at all?
I have not.
Yeah, I know it's not so much about the environment this stop, but I think that it'll be a really interesting counterpoint as you look at some of the environmental factors that are important in the country, to also look at the sort of public profile of these different cities and the citizenry and how they engage with their country and their culture. One of the things that we all are probably familiar with are Chilean wines. And you see in the upper right corner, we just got a call out to the wine region, because you're going to pass through that on your way back from Valparaiso to Santiago, and get a chance to explore some of the wines of the region as well, and a nice wine tasting. So we keep going. If you remember that map that you saw, from the hub of Santiago, you fly north to the Atacama Desert. And the Atacama Desert is very distinguished. It's the driest non-polar desert in the world. I mean, you can say, well, hey, Lauren, we can see deserts anywhere in the world, so why is being a desert in Chile special? And there are a number of reasons why. It's the only true desert to receive less precipitation than the polar deserts, and it's the largest fog desert in the world. And I don't know, Dean Burke, you may be able to say this better than I can because I'm not an environmentalist, but there's a way in which there's a blockage of moisture moving through this region, and that makes vegetation kind of desolate in the Atacama Desert, and it deprives the soil of water and nutrients. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that. I know you haven't been, but I bet it's going to be interesting for you to explore this.
Yeah, it's easy to get me to start to talk about the deserts of the world, but the areas around 20 degrees north and south latitude are deserts globally, because of the way that the maximum amount of heat that the Earth receives is at the equator. and there's a lot of air rising at the equator that is drawing in, that is moving air up. Anyway, we can talk about general circulation patterns when we're there, but all the major deserts of the world are at about 20 degrees north and south latitude, or in the rain shadow of mountain ranges, which is why Tierra del Fuego is so dry, is because it's in the rain shadow of the Andes.
All right. Well, I have heard you talk about deserts, and I can assure those of you traveling on this program that it's a lot of fun to talk to Dean Burke about these environments. The one other thing that I just want to mention about the Atacama is, in addition to having an incredible population of flamingos, as you see pictured at the top here, and a wonderful variety of hotel accommodations that we can stay in. So you see our hotel in the bottom right. Atacama is, for Chilean people and South American people, sort of a destination, a resort kind of a destination. For us, I think our greatest curiosity about the region is the environmental message, but it's also home to the Chinchorro mummies. Those are the oldest artificially mummified human remains that have been found in the Atacama Desert. They predate the Egyptian mummies by thousands of years. And because of the lack of moisture, it helps to preserve these samples. So there's actually a museum in Santiago that you can see, where you can learn more about these mummies before you head out to the Atacama. But it's not often talked about when you talk about Chile, to speak about the indigenous populations and the indigenous history in the region. But I do want to touch on that as we go through our presentation, because I think it's really important to understand the culture where you're visiting. So let's keep going. From Atacama, we fly south to the Chilean Lake District, and you'll remember that that's sort of past Santiago, going much further south. The Lake District is considered sort of the gateway to the beginning of the Patagonia region. And I love the picture in the upper left because it captures so much of what the Lake District is about. You see there one of the volcanoes, and that's what the Lake District is known for. I don't know if you remember, and I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I think it was about a decade back, there was a volcanic eruption in Chile, and that was one of these volcanoes here in the Lake District that you see pictured. I had the opportunity to visit them, and I really enjoyed looking at the difference in the landscape, the way in which the volcanic activity in that region has made fertile grounds, has made really beautiful forests, and the preservation that's been done there with the park system. I was kayaking when I was in the Lake District. And I will say that it's a big area for outdoor activity. We don't think of it because we think of Patagonia as the place you want to go for outdoors, but the Lake District is as well. Really, really beautiful. Also known for being a place where many German settlers moved, were recruited to kind of start a community in this region of Chile. And so it's known for its German architecture, which you see in the picture there. Just right around the center of the picture, you see one of the buildings that features the German architecture. And that's one of the highlights of coming to the Lake District. The Lake District is also the point where, when I first went to Chile, where I encountered the Mapuche people. Those are one of the indigenous groups that live in Chile, and are known for many different things, but they have a very strong preservation impulse in terms of their connection with the land, and their sense of responsibility to the environment, and sort of keepers of the natural environment in this region. So I'm really keen on working in an opportunity to visit with some of the local Mapuche leaders while visiting in this region. And I'll just stop and see, Dean Burke, I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to say about the Chilean Lake District.
No, I don't think so.
All right,
Thank
keep going. So our next stop, this is a real treat. And I'm going to say that this is one of the reasons why I love this itinerary. I have been to Chile, as I said, many times, at least 5 times. And it's hard to see it all when you go, because there is so much to explore and so many different kinds of environments. And I love this itinerary because you get to touch on nearly everything that is important to see on a trip to Chile, and you get to do it in one trip. So Chiloe Island is an excursion that you're going to take from the Lake District. Chiloe is known very much so for two things, for its tradition of fishing. So it's a very traditional community of fishermen, and that's a big part of the culture. Its aquatic wildlife is very important in that region, and it's also known for its birds. The bird watching in Chiloe Island is a very important thing to do if you're someone who enjoys natural wildlife. And this is one of the reasons why people go there, to see the wide variety of birds that are native to the region. So it's a bit of a hike to take the trip to Chiloe, but I think it's really worth it. I felt it was important to work that into this itinerary. And I'm thrilled that you're going to get to stop and see something that's off the beaten path. Not a lot of people get to see when they go to Chile. So we'll keep going. I know a few of you have asked questions, and I'm definitely going to get back to your questions when we get to the Q&A portion of the trip. So don't worry, and please feel free to keep posting your questions in the Q&A box. And here we are at Torres de Paine National Park. So that is the next stop. We go further south from the Chilean Lake District, and we stay in a beautiful hotel compound in that region. Doris De Baine is sort of the beginning of the Patagonia region, and people go there again for the animal wildlife. They go there for the forests and the mountains. This is a huge outdoor destination. Lots of hiking and activities that you can do that are going to be optional on this trip. But I really want to take this opportunity to pass back to Dean Burke, so that she can talk a little bit about what she loves about Patagonia and why it's an important place to visit.
Yeah, this is an area that's like visiting the Tetons and then driving south. So when you're in the national park, you have this stunning mountainous landscape with not so much commercial development and residential development, by the way, as there is in Jackson Hole. Outside, it's just surrounded by the beautiful grasslands and shrublands. It's cold. In fact, just as a note, if you're going to come on the trip, you will want to not only have your beach sandals for Santiago, but you will want to have your down jacket stuffed in there. Cold and dry and beautiful. And the traditional estancias or ranches are really just a crucial part of Patagonia and all of Tierra del Fuego. And these are generally, large ranches that are run primarily for sheep production, although also some cattle as well. And there's a whole traditional Spanish culture surrounding sheep herding and cattle herding. And right now, the main resource people are relying on is wool production and shipping primarily now to the EU. Those are my students up there on the left.
I was trying to get to the sheep.
Oh, sheep production.
Some of your pictures there.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, I have spent quite a bit of time on these estancias with students to help them understand the challenges of livestock production in sustainably, particularly under the threats of climate change. One of the interesting demographic changes that's happening in this area is that some of the largest estancias are being bought by wealthy individuals, primarily from North America, in the name of conservation. Many of them are still doing some grazing activity on them and trying to keep either to the traditions or using some newer techniques that they think might be more sustainable. You can see all the wool stacked up there There are new breeds of sheep introduced to these estancias. They're really into merino and hybrids of merino with other sheep, because merino actually aren't very hardy. But as I mentioned, it's cold and windy. So anyway, it's a whole important part of the culture and of the landscape in this area. Just to sort of touch on the challenges the owners and gauchos deal with are very similar to those faced in other dryland ecosystems around the world. There are a number of invasive species. Climate is changing and there's less available water, so there's more frequent drought. The predators are really can take out a fair number of sheep, so there's a whole industry surrounding raising sheepdogs. And you'll see this all over the world. These estancias are facing the same sorts of issues, but the demographic change is that many of the traditional people who lived and worked here are moving from the rural areas to the cities for what they imagine to be a better lifestyle. And that, of course, leaves these landscapes less actively managed. I could go on, but I should stop.
Well, I would love to just go back to the picture that we had. Let me see if I can get back to it. There we go. With your students, and also, I mean, everyone loves to highlight penguins. So
yeah, these are.
If you could talk a little bit about your some of the things that you've experienced with taking students there, and how they received the experience of being in Chile.
Yeah, well, first, those are Wyoming students in the upper left, and I want to add that we told them it was cold and windy in Patagonia, but they thought, we've seen cold and windy. They were cold. They didn't bring enough clothes, but they had wonderful real experiences. We camped at the estancias or stayed in the bunkhouses there, and we looked at how biodiversity is being influenced by climate change. Those king penguins down on the bottom left are really suffering, particularly with respect to their hatchlings being able to make it. And so that was a major thing that we looked at in the King near in the southern edge of Tierra del Fuego. We also went on many hikes and studied the guanacos, the native herbivore of the area, and how they compete and don't compete with the livestock. This would be similar to the way pronghorn antelope and deer compete with cattle and sheep in the Western US, the way the European elk compete with the grazing nomadic systems in Inner Mongolia. So we did a lot of intercontinental comparisons, but they had the opportunity to be out and in these environments talking to the people who live and work there, either on ranches or in the national parks, working on biodiversity conservation.
That's wonderful. And I love the fact that we get to kind of incorporate some of these kinds of learnings into the trip for alumni. But also, I'm going to emphasize for those of you who are considering traveling that we're not going to be camping on estancias.
Yeah. This will be a grown-up trip. Yes.
Yes. So, yeah, when I spoke with Dean Burke about the idea of doing this trip, and she told me, the itineraries they've done in the past, I said, well, boy, you're going to love this because there's not going to be any camping. So it is kind of more of a vacation grade travel experience that you can expect. But still with the kind of quality learning experiences that some of the students might enjoy. So I'm just going to wrap up and round out our conversation about the itinerary before I go to your question, with highlighting that there is an extension that you can do to go to visit Easter Island on this trip. So for those who want to go a bit further afield and really touch on all the things that you should see when you're in this part of the Southern Hemisphere, the Eastern Island extension is an option for you. And of course, a totally different way of looking at the country of Chile, the history of Easter Island and the landscapes that are there are really very different from anything else you would see on the trip. What's most interesting to me when I traveled to Chile about Easter Island is when you talk to Chileans about it, they very much feel a sense of cultural connection to it. So even though it is so sort of far out in the Pacific Ocean, and we as North Americans don't necessarily think of Easter Island as Chile, they very much own that culture and particularly the indigenous heritage that goes along with it. So I would encourage you all, if you're interested in learning more, we do have a Chile virtual tour on our Yale Alumni Academy website that has a lot of resources you can explore to learn more about the country, about sightseeing in the country, as well as about the history and culture. And that's available to you free and on demand at any time. We are recording this session, and this session will be available on demand as well for those of you who want to watch it later or share it with others that you know. And now we have a chance to go to some of your questions. So we have a few questions. Feel free to post anything that you would like to have addressed, posted in the Q&A box. Eugene asked if a recording is made accessible online. It will be made accessible online. It will be linked on the Yale Alumni Academy webpage. And on that same page, you will find the Chile virtual tour, as well as information about registering for the travel program. The travel program is currently about half sold out, and we have a waiting list for singles. So if you do think that you're interested, I would encourage you to register soon. I want to just answer a couple of logistical questions about the travel and then go to some of the questions about the environment that people have asked. Ken asks, what are the travel arrangements to and from the US? So usually for flights on our Yale Alumni Academy programs, you organize your own flights to and from the international destination, and then we organize the flights within the country. So flying to Santiago from the US, I'm sure that they have flights from Florida. That is an option for you. There should be direct flights as well. We do offer assistance through our travel provider on the flight arrangements should you need assistance. Alan asks if I could repeat the name of the art district in Santiago. I mentioned a couple of them. La Staria neighborhood is sort of the bohemian cultural neighborhood where you might equate it to a neighborhood in the US where you've had a fair amount of regeneration and bringing in artists and chic restaurants and shops and things like that. And likewise, there is Bellas Artes, which is another art district. And you might have also been asking about Valparaiso, which is the district that I mentioned has UNESCO World Heritage status for its street art. So I will put those in the chat before this session is over, just for anybody who wants to learn more about them. Let's see, Ken asks if the Alumni Academy and Classic Escapes have done this trip before and vetted the travel routes and hotels. The answer to that is that we work with travel providers on the ground through our partners at Classic Escapes, and those providers are all vetted. Yes, the venues as far as hotel accommodations, etc., are vetted. The president of Classic Escapes generally goes and stays in them and does the route of the trip before our group ever even gets organized. So that is the reason why we've been working with them on this trip. And I myself have traveled quite a bit in Chile and have also confirmed that I'm comfortable with the itinerary and the accommodations that we're staying in. So that's the answer to that. Someone wanted to know how many people we expect to join the trip. We're capping the trip at just about 22 people. And we have crossed our minimum for the trip to operate already. So we do expect the trip to depart. Not foreseeing any unusual things that could happen. No one could have imagined a pandemic in 2019. But unless there's another pandemic, this trip would go ahead. And let's see, are there swimming opportunities in the Lake District? Interesting question. My experience when I was traveling in the Lake District was that it's not really a place for swimming. Some people do, however, go to the Pacific coast of Chile for swimming. So uh, there's not really a lot of time. But so I wouldn't say that you're going to go on this trip and swim in the ocean or swim in lakes. I would say that you probably will be able to enjoy the pool at the hotel in the Atacama. Um, so that is the answer to Mark's question. And okay, Alan, I will get back to you on the answer to your question. Martin wants to know, what is the highest altitude that we will experience? We've had some problems in the US mountains and we are concerned. Okay, so Martin, I don't have the exact number of the highest altitude. I do have it in the pre-trip documentation. So I have your contact information and I will send you details on that. I want to go to a couple of questions that have been asked on the environmental topic. See, Dean Burke, if you have thoughts about answering them. Let's see. Oh, are you typing
Sure,
answers to them?
I engaged. I am. I'm typing answers to some. We deans are used to these webinars, but I didn't type an answer to why is there groundwater in the desert. So
Okay.
Give me that chance. So the maximum radiation hits the equator. So hot air rises there because it's hot. And as it rises, it loses moisture. So that's why the equator is the wettest place on Earth. So it rains most there. But as those air masses rise, they separate and they dry and they fall at 20 degrees. So there's very little precipitation in those zones, north and south of the equator. Groundwater in deserts comes from somewhere else. So this is groundwater that is flowing there from places where there is precipitation, that is where there's infiltration from precipitation. So that's the long story short. It is, as we say in ecology, allochthonous, came from somewhere else.
Thank you for that. I actually would love to answer some of these questions that you've answered. And you're very thorough. I love it. I've not had a webinar guest who gets all the questions answered before I can even read them. So this is fantastic. But I would love to, just for the record, because our session is being recorded for those who will watch in the future, would love to answer a couple of the questions that Tom's question, if Chile has more climate change than other places, which I think, Tom, you're really getting at. Is climate change somehow affecting the environment in Chile in a unique way that is more significant than maybe somewhere else? So I wonder what your thoughts are on that, Dean Burke.
Certainly for the Patagonian region, it has pretty low plant diversity because these are plants that have lived for thousands of years in a very cold and dry environment, and they're well adapted for that. And there's a little more water available because evaporation is lower. But as you raise the temperature, the plants can't get to as much water because more is evaporating. And so they don't have other kinds of species that are adapted to the really high desert environment with very, very low water availability. I don't really mean to say that they're more vulnerable than other dry places on Earth, but the dry places are vulnerable to climate change. And there's some circulation reasons why actually northern Chile is the area where it's predicted to be 3 or 3.5 degrees C. And I don't actually know what that is. That's what the climate models are projecting. That's high, but there are places in the northern hemisphere, the far northern hemisphere, that are experiencing that level of climate change. There are many high altitude areas in Chile, and climate change, just as it does in far north areas of North America, will melt permafrost, which changes ecosystems dramatically and pumps more carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, which creates a positive feedback loop. So
You're reminding me that we had an interview that you and I and Bill did, Professor Lauenroth did, before the pandemic, and it was published in our 2020 ill-fated 2020 travel catalog. But it was such a good interview. It was so fascinating because you talked about these kinds of things, you know, the unique aspects of the biosphere in Chile, that I would like to make sure we make that available to everyone. So we will put that interview up on our Chile travel program webpage so that you all can read it, because it was such an interesting take that both of you had on these topics.
There was another question that I do want to address, and it was from someone who cares about the environment and is worried about the carbon footprint of flying to Chile. And that's well merited, worrying about flying. But I happen to be working with airlines right now, and even the Trade Association for Airlines. And there is an international standard set by airlines for carbon offsets. And so when the airline offers you carbon offsets, and they mostly do, or they're buying them for you, they are purchasing offsets that are real. That is, they've been vetted by ecologists such as ours in our forest school here. So there, you know, there is no other way to travel long distances quickly than flying, and the airlines are very aware that it's very difficult to reach real net zero. So they have to get to real zero. So they get to net zero by purchasing offsets.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. I also thought that was a really important one to touch on, and I'll say it comes up periodically with all of our travel programs. You know, we have alumni who are of the mindset that we should just stop traveling and let's all just stay at home, and that's the way to deal with climate change. And I think the topic is a lot more complex than that. There are places in the world, and certainly there are places in Chile, where if the tourists were to stop coming, the economic outlook for the population would be to begin exploiting the natural landscape in a way that they're not doing now because they have revenue for tourism. So it's not as simple as saying the plane causes the problem, so don't take it, or us visiting a place causes the problem, so let's stop going. You have to think about the sort of interdependence of the tourism economy with the ability to sustain and conserve environmental projects in the countries that people visit. So I'm glad that you made that point, and it addresses Anna's point as well, whether vacation travel like this is environmentally responsible.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that it's 100% responsible, but I am going to tell you that there are ways to do it that are better than others, and most of the airlines can help you get there. Anthony, in the background there, someone asked to get the trip map up again so that they can take a screenshot of it. Can we, I guess Lauren, you're controlling the PowerPoint.
Yeah, let me see if I can get to it do it without making you guys look through all the former slides. Oh, I think that's too late for that, but that's all right. Let me see if I can get to it. Here we go. There you are. There's the trip map. Jeff says, how would you assess Santiago's coping with climate change as compared with other major cities in the US and or Western Europe? I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse, Dean Burke. That one's a pretty sophisticated question.
It isn't, but I know someone who works exactly on this. She just, one of our faculty members, who was just elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, by the way, she led the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report that was just released on the first week of April on the contribution of cities to climate change and the consequences of climate change for cities. And she studies cities globally. And I think she could point me to a place where we could look at that and answer that question.
Well, I know that we're going to have you back. And I mentioned to you, and I'll share since we have over 100 people on with us today, that we do a climate change conversation series in the fall where we feature many faculty from the Yale School of the Environment, and as well as the Environmental Humanities program at Yale. So we've already invited Dean Burke back this fall to participate in climate change conversations. And this is an interesting topic, talking about what cities are doing to respond. Let's see if there's any other, what are the most accessible and impactful ways to support the Chilean ecosystem through volunteer work there? Are there any organizations or causes that you would recommend?
I don't know. I do work with the Nature Conservancy and they do have a program there, but I don't know of the others.
I think that that's a good topic for us to share in the follow-up for this, and we will send this recording out to everyone who was here in the session. And likewise, we'll get to Renee's question regarding some books on the arts, history, or culture of Chile. So we will share some of that in the follow-up. Let's see if there's any more questions. Someone wants to know what are the options if you register for this trip and you need to change your plans. This gives me an opportunity to share with everyone that on all of our travel programs, with the exception, I believe, of our Australia cruise, that is going to see the solar eclipse in 2023, all of our other programs have a 90-day risk-free cancellation policy. And that means that if you register for the program, you can cancel and receive a full refund of your deposit in the form that you paid it at any time up till 90 days prior to departure. For any reason, you don't need to give us an explanation. So this particular person wanted to know if you can switch names up to 4 weeks in advance. And yes, that is something, if a family member wanted to travel in your place, we would allow that. So, and if you have questions about our policies, please do feel free to give us a call or send us an email. Let's see, I think we've touched on most of the questions here. Is there anything else that you want to share, Dean Burke, about the trip?
I hope you come. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, and if enough of you sign up, I'll get to go too. So bring bring your kids, bring your whole family. If you,
I guess I would say, I would just say one more thing. I really enjoy teaching and talking about ecology with anyone, and especially people who are as interested as all of you. sometimes the students aren't as interested as adult audiences are. So I just add that.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's really always great when we get our Yale alumni together in a room like this and we have a chance to talk about interesting ideas, because people make such wonderful contributions to the conversation. Anne says, are 12 people max or minimum? 12 people minimum. So we've already crossed our minimum threshold to operate the trip, and so it's about 22 maximum. And if there's anything that we haven't answered or you want us to answer after the session is over, you can email us at alumniacademy.yale.edu. I also encourage you to please visit the website for the Yale School of the Environment. They are doing some incredible, fascinating work. They have some of the world's best climate scientists and scholars on environmental issues overall. There is not enough time to learn about all the professors there and all the amazing things that they're doing, but there is a really wonderful blog on your website, Dean Burke, that I think highlights news and things that are happening at the school. So just as we wrap up, I'm happy for you to share any highlights that you would like people to know about of what's going on at School of the Environment.
Oh dear, you caught me by surprise about that. I have to go. I have to leave Chile and come home to New Haven to answer
Well,
to answer
whenever I
that
go
one.
on your website, I find it's like a rabbit hole. I've spent a half an hour there reading all the really interesting stories of the things that you all are doing.
Well, I guess I'd say just one highlight, our professor of green chemistry and engineering, Dr. Paul Anastas, just recently won the Volvo Prize. It
Oh,
is
wow.
considered to be the most important, it's like the Nobel Prize of the environment, for his work on developing and working with companies to develop chemicals that are not toxic when they decay, and on chemicals that don't contribute to climate change. Our professor, Tony Leiserowitz, in the Yale program in climate change communications, was just recognized as the second most impactful climate change scientist in the world.
Wow.
So yeah, that's like the first in the United States. And we're very, very proud of him. We had 3 alumni who graduated, who started a company on working with variants of coral to be able to re-implant coral in places that are threatened by climate change or acidification. And they just won the Earthshot Prize, the initial prize from Great Britain. It's a huge prize, and we're very proud of our
They were
alumni.
covered really widely in the news for that, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had about 40 students go to the Committee of the Parties on Climate Change. And some of them were international students who actually did the negotiating for their countries. So I'm proud of our faculty, our alumni, and our students.
Excellent. Well, we're really proud to have you here with us this afternoon and to be able to feature you and your work on this trip. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank all of you for spending this hour getting to learn a little bit about traveling to Chile with Yale Alumni Academy and Yale School of the Environment. And I look forward to seeing you on our next presentation. Have a wonderful day, everyone.